My name is Emily Thompson, and this is the moment my family broke my heart beyond recognition. It happened on Christmas Eve, in the sterile, overlit hallway of Las Vegas Medical Center. I had just signed the surgical consent forms, my fingers shaking as I handed the clipboard back to the nurse. My abdomen throbbed with a sharp, pulsing pain, internal bleeding from a complication that had silently grown worse after the car crash 3 weeks ago. The doctors told me I couldn't wait any longer. Surgery needed to happen tonight, and I had no one. Except my 3-year-old triplets, Liam, Lily, and Lucas, who were asleep in the corner of the hospital room on a blanket-covered bench, unaware that their mother might not be there when they woke up. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, my thumb hovering over the call button. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to beg. But I had exhausted every other option. My last hope was the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My parents. When the call connected, my mother's face lit up the screen, glowing with excitement and joy. "Hi, honey," she chirped, music thumping softly in the background. "We're just about to board. Can this wait?" "Mom." I tried to keep my voice even, but it cracked. "I'm about to be taken into surgery. I need someone to stay with the kids tonight." The smile vanished. My father appeared beside her, holding a cocktail in one hand and waving at someone off screen. "Surgery? Again?" he muttered, annoyed. "Jesus, Emily, we're about to go on our Christmas cruise. You should have planned this better." "Planned internal bleeding?" I whispered, tears already blurring the screen. "I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. Please, just come get them. Just for one night." My mother's tone turned ice cold. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans. We've had these tickets for months. Your brother Daniel booked us the penthouse suite, and it's non-refundable." My hands went numb. "Mom, I might not. Wake up." There was a pause. The sound of seagulls and laughter in the background made the silence even louder. Then my father leaned in and said the words I'll never forget. "You're becoming a real burden, Emily. We're retired. We deserve peace. You've always had drama swirling around you, and now you're trying to ruin Christmas for us too?" I stared at the screen. My kids, my surgery, my fear. None of it mattered. I wasn't their daughter right now. I was an inconvenience. They hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't sob. I just stared at the blank screen as my heart cracked open. A nurse walked in. Valerie, the only person in this hospital who'd shown me any real kindness. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I didn't know how to answer. So I told her everything, the shortened version, the part that mattered. They won't come. They said I'm a burden. She looked at me, then at my children asleep in the corner, then back at me. "I have a friend," she said. "Her name is Olivia. She used to work in pediatric trauma. She's a full-time nanny now. If you trust me, I'll call her." Trust? I had none left. But something about Valerie's voice made me nod. As she stepped out of the room, I picked up my phone again. This time, I wasn't calling. I was canceling. I opened my banking app. I'd been sending my parents $2,500 every month since their early retirement 3 years ago, covering their mortgage, their utility bills, their little luxuries because they sacrificed so much raising me. And I believed it. Until tonight. I canceled the auto payment. Then I opened my messages and typed, "I will no longer be supporting you financially. You chose a cruise over your own grandchildren. Don't. Contact me again." I hit send just as Valerie came back in, smiling. "Olivia's on her way." Within an hour, she arrived. A tall, calm woman with a kind voice and a backpack full of books and stuffed animals. The kids loved her instantly. She got down on the floor with them and started reading Where the Wild Things Are. And for a second, I forgot where I was. I forgot about the pain. The hospital staff rolled my bed toward the operating room just before midnight. I glanced back at the small figures huddled around Olivia. Lily waved at me, her little hand clutching a toy dinosaur. Liam was half asleep. Lucas was asking about Santa. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I forced a smile and whispered, "Be good. Mommy will be back soon." As the doors closed, I felt the tears finally fall. This was the night I let go of the fantasy that my parents would ever be who I needed them to be. I wasn't their priority. I never was. And tonight, facing surgery, possibly death, and a future raising triplets alone, I realized that was okay, because I didn't need them anymore. I had me, and that was enough for now. If this story has your heart racing, don't go anywhere. Because what happens after the surgery will shatter everything you think you know about family. Stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe for more true, raw stories that prove strength comes when you least expect it. I woke up disoriented. In the dim glow of the ICU, the sterile scent of antiseptic heavy in the air. The beeping of machines echoed like an uneasy lullaby. My first thoughts weren't about myself. They were about Liam, Lily, and Lucas. Were they okay? Had Olivia stayed? Had they cried for me? My heart pounded harder than the monitors could track. A nurse noticed I was awake and gently reassured me that everything had gone well. "Your babies are fine," she said softly. "That nanny, Olivia, she's been an angel. She's still here." Relief washed over me like warm water, but with it came something darker. Rage. It was Christmas Day. The day children wake up to magic, to hugs and pancakes and wrapping paper. My kids woke up in a hospital room with a stranger, while their grandparents danced on the deck of a cruise ship, sipping champagne and pretending. We didn't exist. I tried to speak, but my throat was too raw. Tubes, machines. My voice lost in the aftermath of survival. Later that afternoon, Olivia brought the kids to visit me. Their joy cracked my heart open all over again. Liam climbed into the hospital bed, whispering, "You're okay, Mommy?" Lily hugged my arm like it was a life vest. Lucas didn't speak. He just curled beside me and held my hand like he was afraid I'd disappear again. I nodded through the pain. "I'm okay," I whispered. "Thanks to you." Olivia stepped back to give us space, but before she left the room, she pressed something into my hand, a folded piece of paper. "This came for you while you were in surgery," she said. Delivery from the front desk. Handwritten. When the kids finally drifted off to sleep on the bench next to me, I opened the note. It was from my parents. It read, "We're disappointed in how you've treated us. This punishment, cutting off our finances, is childish and hurtful. We've done everything for you. Don't make us regret that. No apology, no concern, not a single mention of the surgery, not even a 'hope you're alive.'" I crumpled the paper, feeling my breath shake. They weren't just absent. They were angry I survived without them. And that's when I realized they never loved me unconditionally. Their love was a transaction. As long as I played my role, obedient daughter, financial provider, emotional punching bag, I was accepted. The moment I stepped out of line, I became disposable. It was the ugliest truth I'd ever faced. 2 days later, still recovering, I checked my phone and found over 30 missed calls, mostly from my mother. Her voicemails alternated between guilt trips and subtle threats. "You're being dramatic, Emily. We had plans. You'll understand when the kids are grown. We might have to sell the car. We don't have enough to cover next month's mortgage. You can't just abandon us. Your father is devastated. He says you're ungrateful. We sacrificed everything for you. They had no idea. They had sacrificed nothing. I had put my dreams on hold to raise 3 children. I had buried my husband after a tragic accident and rebuilt from ashes without a roadmap. I had worked late nights doing freelance graphic design to keep the lights on, all while wiring them thousands of dollars each month out of obligation. Not love. And in my moment of need, the moment I literally could have died, they chose a luxury cruise and cocktails. When Jessica, my younger cousin, called later that night, her voice trembling, I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to answer. "I just talked to your mom," she said. "She told everyone you were faking your illness to manipulate them. She said you didn't really need surgery." I was speechless. My surgical scars were still raw. The stitches pulled every time I moved. I had documents, x-rays, doctor's notes, all proof of how close I'd come to dying. "They're trying to save face," Jessica continued. "But people are starting to ask questions. Aunt Marlene told me she saw your dad buying golf clubs 2 weeks ago. They said they were barely scraping by." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I asked Jessica to help me. Not with money, not with childcare. I asked her to help me tell the truth. Within days, Jessica posted the real story in our extended family's group chat. A simple message: Emily had emergency abdominal surgery. She asked her parents to care for the triplets. They refused because they were boarding a holiday cruise. She nearly died. They didn't come. Silence. Then the messages started rolling in. "Are you serious? Emily, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Wait, they told us you were exaggerating. This is disgusting." The story unraveled like thread pulled from a cheap sweater. My parents' mask of dignity started slipping fast. The sympathy that once went their way began shifting, quietly, then loudly, toward me. But it wasn't about revenge. Not for me. It was about clarity. I realized something that night, lying awake in the quiet hospital room, with Lucas asleep on my chest, and Olivia curled on the bench reading a book to Liam and Lily. My kids were safe. I was healing. I had survived. And for the first time in my life, I felt the power of choosing me. No more giving love where it wasn't reciprocated. No more justifying cruelty as tough love. No more wiring money to people who couldn't show up for me when it mattered most. My children would grow up knowing boundaries. They'd know what real love looked like. Not the performative kind, not the conditional kind, but the raw, fierce, undeniable kind that shows up even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. And me? I was just getting started. The rain that night was relentless, tapping against the windows of my apartment like the universe itself was trying to get my attention. Olivia had just left, and the triplets were finally asleep after an exhausting day filled with sticky hands, temper tantrums, and moments of unexpected sweetness. I stood at the sink washing bottles when the knock came, sharp, deliberate, and far too familiar. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I knew who it was. I opened the door only halfway, the chain still on. Standing there, drenched in designer wool coats and indignation, were my parents. My mother clutched her Hermes purse like it could shield her from my judgment, while my father stood stiff, his lips a thin line of suppressed fury. "Emily," my mother said, her voice already veiled in condescension. "This has gone far enough. We need to talk." I stared at her. My chest rose and fell with quiet restraint. "You chose not to talk when I needed you most." "Don't be dramatic," my father snapped, stepping forward as if he could force his way back into my life. "We're your family. You don't get to cut us off like this." I didn't flinch. "You're not just cut off. You're no longer welcome." My mother gasped like I had slapped her. "You're letting money ruin this family?" "No," I said coldly. "You did that when you put cruise tickets above your daughter's life and your grandchildren's safety." The chain stayed on. The door didn't budge. "We didn't know it was that serious," my mother stammered. "You didn't say it was emergency surgery." "You didn't ask," I corrected. "I told you I was being admitted. I told you I needed someone to care for the triplets. You told me I was a burden. and then you went dancing on a yacht while I bled on an operating table. My father's face twisted in discomfort. We had plans, Emily. Commitments. We can't just drop everything every time you fall apart. That was it. The final thread snapped. I stepped away from the door and unlatched the chain, not to invite them in, but to look them fully in the eye. Face as I said what I needed to say. I opened the door wide. I almost died, I said, my voice trembling not with weakness but with rage. I had internal bleeding, and they said if I'd waited one more day I wouldn't have made it. Olivia had to sleep on a hospital bench with 3 toddlers who didn't understand why their mother wasn't waking up. I had to decide, before being wheeled into surgery, who would raise my children if I didn't survive. And you were sipping champagne somewhere off the coast of Florida. The wind whipped through the hallway, flinging wet leaves past their feet. Neither of them spoke. You want to talk about sacrifices? I said, my voice rising. I gave up my career to be a full-time mom after James died. I've skipped meals to pay your bills. I've wired you thousands of dollars while I scraped by on freelance jobs. And not once have you shown up for me when it counted. We're your parents, my father said, his voice brittle with wounded pride. You owe us some respect. I laughed, a bitter, disbelieving laugh. Respect is earned. Dad, and you cashed yours out a long time ago. My mother looked suddenly small. We didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean anything, I replied. And that's the problem. You never meant to help, to love, to protect. Everything you've ever done has been transactional. As long as I was the obedient daughter who paid the mortgage, I was useful. The second I stopped playing that role, I became disposable. There was a long silence. I saw it then, the flicker of something in my mother's eyes. Not remorse, panic, the realization that their safety net had been permanently removed. We might lose the house, she whispered. Then sell the boat, I said. We'd take a loss, my father barked, like that was reason enough for me to reverse everything. So take the loss, I said. You gambled with my life when you chose that cruise. Now you can gamble with your luxury. Lucas stirred, in his sleep behind me. I turned slightly, my voice softening. My kids don't know you, I said. They don't ask for you, because you've never been here. And they're not going to learn the lesson I did. That love comes with a price tag. I was about to close the door when my father reached out and held it. I know we messed up, he said, his voice hoarse. But Emily, we need your help. That was the moment I had been dreading. The plea. The reminder that they were aging, that they were vulnerable, that they were still, despite everything, the people who gave me life. But I looked into my father's eyes and saw not love, not sorrow, but entitlement. They didn't come because they thought I'd forgive them anyway. They came now because they didn't think I'd actually change. I smiled, not cruelly, but clearly. You raised me to believe that family was duty, that obligation was love. I don't believe that anymore, and I'm done carrying your choices. Then I gently closed the door, and for the first time in my life, I locked it, not out of fear, but out of peace. The next morning, they were gone. No note, no call. But something told me this wasn't the end, because when people lose control over you, they don't retreat. They reload. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. I had severed ties with my parents, a decision that left me both liberated and burdened. The triplets, oblivious to the familial turmoil, continued to be the light in my life, their laughter and innocence a balm to my wounded soul. One evening, as I was tucking them into bed, my phone buzzed incessantly. Curious, I picked it up to find a barrage of messages from extended family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, all expressing shock and concern over an email my parents had sent out. They had painted a picture of me as an ungrateful daughter who had abandoned them in their time of need. conveniently omitting the part where they had refused to care for their grandchildren during my emergency surgery. Anger surged through me, but I took a deep breath, determined not to let their manipulations control me any longer. I decided to respond with the truth. I crafted a heartfelt message detailing the events that had transpired, including their refusal to help during my surgery and their subsequent demands for financial support. I sent it to the same group, letting them see the full picture. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive. Many expressed disbelief at my parents' actions and offered their assistance. Some even shared their own stories of familial betrayal, creating a sense of solidarity and understanding. It was a turning point, a moment where I realized I was not alone in my struggles. Amidst this, Jessica reached out to me. She had confronted our parents after learning the truth and was appalled by their behavior. She apologized for not seeing things sooner and expressed a desire to rebuild our relationship. Tentatively, I agreed, hopeful that we could forge a new bond based on honesty and mutual respect. As I navigated these changes, I also focused on creating a stable environment for my children. With the financial burden of supporting my parents lifted, I was able to invest in better childcare and even started a small business from home. It was challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of purpose and control over my life. However, the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, I received a letter from a law firm representing my parents. They were threatening legal action, claiming I had promised them lifelong financial support. I was stunned. The audacity of their claim was staggering. I immediately contacted my attorney, who assured me that their case was baseless. Still, the stress of potential legal battles loomed over me. Determined not to let fear dictate my actions, I took proactive steps. I organized all correspondence, financial records, and any evidence that could support my case. I also reached out to the family members who had offered support, asking if they would be willing to provide statements if needed. Their affirmative responses bolstered my confidence. In the midst of preparing for a possible legal confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor, my mother. She stood at my doorstep, looking weary and remorseful. She handed me a letter, saying, "Please read this. It's from both of us." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away. I sat down and opened the letter. It was an apology, acknowledging their mistakes and expressing a desire to make amends. They claimed to have started therapy and were working on changing their ways. The sincerity in their words was unexpected, and I found myself conflicted. Could people truly change? Did they deserve a second chance? I decided to approach the situation cautiously. I replied with a letter of my own, expressing my willingness to consider rebuilding our relationship, but only if they demonstrated genuine change over time. I set clear boundaries, emphasizing that my children's well-being was my top priority. It was a step towards healing, but I remained vigilant, aware that trust would have to be earned. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on my family and personal growth. I continued to build my business, creating a stable and nurturing environment for my children. Jessica became a regular presence in our lives, her support and love a source of comfort. Together, we began to redefine what family meant to us. The journey was far from over, but I had taken the first steps towards reclaiming my life and forging a new path, one defined by resilience, love, and the unwavering determination to protect and provide for my children. The weeks after my mother's unexpected visit passed like a slow-burning fuse. Every moment felt heavy, like I was waiting for something. An apology to finally make sense, or for the next betrayal to strike. I'd laid my boundaries down as firmly as I could, told them there was no coming back into my life without change. But what they gave me instead wasn't growth. It was silence, deafening, hollow silence. And then came the storm. It started with Jessica's call on a rainy Thursday morning. I was balancing Alara on my hip, trying to spoon oatmeal into Elijah's mouth while Ezra smeared blueberries all over his onesie. Jessica's voice was rushed, panicked even. "Mara, turn on the news. Right now. Channel 7. I placed Alara gently in her playpen, turned the volume down low so the triplets wouldn't hear, and flipped on the TV. My stomach sank the moment the headline flashed across the screen. Retired couple facing eviction blame, estranged daughter. For financial collapse. The footage that played next felt like a slap across the face. My parents, sitting on their worn-out porch, talking to a reporter. My mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My father, stone-faced, claiming they were abandoned by their only daughter during a medical crisis. He had the nerve to call me selfish. They spoke of the years of financial support they'd sacrificed to give me. My mother even mentioned the triplets, calling them the grandchildren we've never been allowed to love. I stared at the screen, stunned. Lies. All of it. And broadcast for the world to see. In less than 2 hours, the video had gone viral. Their sob story was being shared on social media, plastered across morning news segments, and worst of all, people believed them. My inbox was flooded with hate mail, messages calling me a heartless daughter, a user, a manipulator. One even said, "Children like you are why good parents end up in shelters." I wanted to scream, to cry, but I didn't. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. There were dark circles under my eyes, stress carved into the edges of my expression, but beneath that, I saw something else. Steel. The kind you forge in fire. They wanted a public war? Fine. But this time, I wasn't playing defense. I called Jessica first. She was furious, more than I'd ever seen her. "They lied to everyone," she said. "Do you want me to go on the record?" "I will. I'll tell the truth." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Not yet. Let me talk to my lawyer first." My attorney, Carla Torres, was as sharp as they came. She'd helped me draft the initial financial cutoff notice months ago. When I told her what happened, she immediately sprang into action. "We're not just going to clear your name," she said. "We're going to dismantle theirs, legally, publicly, permanently." She helped me prepare a full statement, documented with hospital records, email screenshots, transaction history, even the message from Olivia, the nanny, offering to stay with the kids during surgery when my parents refused. Every piece of evidence was lined up like soldiers in a courtroom war. We released the statement 48 hours after the interview aired, and then I posted the video. It wasn't flashy, no dramatic lighting. Just me, sitting in the nursery, surrounded by the laughter of my 3 children. I spoke plainly, clearly without venom, but every word cut deeper than any insult they had thrown my way. My parents refused to care for my children while I was undergoing emergency surgery. I could have died, and they chose concert tickets and Christmas cocktails instead of showing up. For years I sent them money, I gave them my trust, and in return they gave me nothing but disappointment. Now they want to twist the story and call it love. That's not love, that's manipulation. I ended the video with a photo, taken the day after my surgery, tubes still in my arms, the triplets curled up next to me in the hospital bed. "This is what survival looks like," I said. "And I will never apologize for choosing my children over people who never chose me." It went viral, but this time it was different. Support came flooding in. Other parents, survivors, even influencers, who had followed my earlier posts began resharing my story, urging people to look deeper before passing judgment. A single mother in Chicago messaged me saying, "Thank you. You gave me the strength to cut off the toxicity in my life." 2. A nurse from Las Vegas wrote, "I remember you. I was on the floor the night of your surgery. You were so brave." But the most surprising call came the next day, from the news station that aired the original piece. We'd like to offer you a right to reply, an on-camera interview. I hesitated. My instinct was to stay private. But then I thought of my kids, of what it meant to stand up, not just for myself, but for every parent who's ever been shamed for protecting their peace. I agreed. The interview aired during prime time. I sat across from the same reporter who had interviewed my parents. This time, the narrative was different. We went through every detail, the facts, the screenshots, the hospital records. I told my story, not as a daughter scorned, but as a mother reborn, stronger, clearer. The fallout was swift. My parents lost their GoFundMe campaign. People demanded refunds. Their lies had unraveled in real time. Jessica confirmed every word. I said on social media, standing with me. Even Aunt Brenda, once their biggest defender, called me to say she'd cut ties with them completely. But the moment that broke me came a week later, a hand-delivered letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from my father. Inside, just one line. We were wrong. No excuses, no manipulation, no blame. For the first time in my life, they didn't ask for anything, just acknowledged the damage they'd done. And that, more than any apology, more than any redemption, was the start of something real. But the story wasn't over yet. The next twist was already waiting, and it would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. The days following my parents' public apology were a whirlwind of emotions. Their letter, a rare admission of guilt, had stirred something deep within me, a mix of hope, skepticism, and a longing for closure. I found myself replaying their words over and over, searching for sincerity in their handwriting, in the choice of words they used. Jessica, ever the peacemaker, urged me to consider meeting them. "They're trying, Mara," she said during one of our late-night calls. "Maybe it's time to see if they truly mean it." I hesitated, torn between the desire to protect my children and the faint hope of mending our fractured family. Eventually, I agreed to a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the suburbs, away from prying eyes and familiar judgments. As I approached the cafe, memories flooded back. Childhood birthdays, family dinners, moments that once held joy but were now tainted by betrayal. Inside, my parents sat nervously, their demeanor subdued. Gone were the airs of superiority. They looked aged, humbled. My mother clutched a worn-out purse, and my father's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee. "Thank you for coming," my mother began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been attending therapy, trying to understand where we went wrong." My father nodded, adding, "We realize now how much we hurt you, and we're truly sorry." I listened, my heart guarded. Their words were what I had longed to hear. But trust, once broken, is not easily mended. I spoke of boundaries, of the need for consistent actions over empty promises. They agreed, expressing a willingness to rebuild our relationship step by step. In the weeks that followed, small gestures began to emerge. They sent letters to the triplets, simple notes filled with love and apologies. Jessica facilitated video, calls, allowing them to see their grandchildren, to witness the lives they had once neglected. I remained cautious, observing their efforts, weighing their sincerity. It was a delicate dance between hope and self-preservation. But as time passed, I began to see genuine change, a willingness to listen, to understand, to be present. One evening, as I watched the triplets giggle during a video call with their grandparents, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Perhaps, just perhaps, healing was possible. 3 months had passed since that cautious meeting at the cafe, the first time I had seen my parents without resentment coloring every glance. But just when I thought things were finally leveling out, just when I dared to believe we were healing, The past came clawing back in a way I never saw coming. It began with a phone call, an unknown number, too early in the morning to be anything good. I was feeding the triplets their oatmeal, Olivia humming a lullaby in the background, when I picked up. The voice on the other end was panicked, familiar, and unexpected. "Mara? It's Aunt Clarice," she said, breathless. "Your father's been arrested." I froze, the spoon slipping from my fingers and clattering against the counter. "What?" "Fraud. Financial. Something to do with old accounts, Mara. I don't know all the details, but you need to get down to the station. Your mom's falling apart." The words didn't make sense. After everything, after the therapy, the apology letters, the downsizing, they were finally trying to do better. Weren't they? I told Olivia to stay with the kids and drove to the police station, my hands trembling on the steering wheel the entire way. When I arrived, I saw my mother slumped in a hard plastic chair in the lobby, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, her purse hanging off one shoulder like dead weight. Her eyes snapped up when she saw me, and for the first time in my life, she didn't put on a performance. There was no manipulation in her voice when she said, "I didn't know. Mara, I swear to God, I didn't know." Inside, the truth spilled out in sharp bursts. My father had never fully severed ties with his old business contacts, the ones who had pulled him into bad investments and shady ventures years ago. Even after his apology to me, after moving into the modest condo and picking up a part-time job at the hardware store, he'd been quietly funneling what little money he had into a desperate attempt to climb back to the life he lost. He forged documents, faked income statements, took out a loan in someone else's name. That someone was me, my name, my social security number, a business address I hadn't used in over 4 years. He'd applied for a $50,000 business credit line using my identity, something he swore he'd pay off before anyone noticed. But the debt collectors had come knocking, and now he was facing charges that carried real jail time. I stared at him, through the thick glass of the visitor's booth, trying to comprehend how the man who had cried in front of me just months earlier could still betray me so completely. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. I wanted to make things right, to give your mother back the life I ruined." "You used me," I said coldly. "Again." He put his hand to the glass, but I didn't lift mine. I stood and walked out without another word. The betrayal cut deeper than anything before. Not because it was the first time, but because I had finally started to believe he could change. I had opened the door, a crack, a sliver, and he had shoved it wide open, not to step in with kindness, but to steal. I filed the fraud report that afternoon, tears streaming down my face as I signed the forms. I had to protect myself, my children, my future. The detective, a woman not much older than me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it now." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling as the weight of my father's betrayal settled over me like a heavy blanket. I kept thinking about the night, before my surgery, how they had chosen to attend a gala instead of watching their grandchildren, how they had called me a burden, how I had cut them off for it, only to let them back in again. And now I was paying the price. The next morning, Jessica arrived at my doorstep. Her face was pale, exhausted. She knew. She had found out everything before I even had the chance to call. "I'm sorry," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't know. He didn't tell me either." She stayed with me all day, helping with the kids, making tea, listening without interrupting. She cried when I told her about the forged loan application. She held my hand as I wondered aloud how much of our father's change had been real, and how much had just been a new performance. And then she did something that surprised me. She offered to testify. "If it comes to that," she said, her voice steady, "I'll tell the court what he did. You're not going through this alone again." It was in that moment I realized something quietly powerful had happened amid the chaos. Jessica wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my ally, my friend. She had come out from the shadow of our parents and seen them for who they were. And in doing so, she had become someone I could finally trust. The scandal hit our extended family, like a bomb. Cousins reached out with disbelief. Old family friends called to ask what was true. And through it all, I stayed silent. I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The truth was loud enough on its own. The next few weeks were consumed by legal filings, court appearances, and letters from banks and creditors. But I had something I hadn't had before: clarity. I knew who I was. I knew who I wasn't. And I knew that the legacy I was building, through pain, perseverance, and unshakable love for my children, was far more powerful than the family name. My parents had tried to preserve at any cost. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to win. I just needed peace, and this time, I would get it on my own terms. The courtroom was colder than I expected, the kind of sterile, gray stillness that pressed against your chest like a weight. I sat in the front row, my hands wrapped tightly around a folder full of documents, statements, bank records, the forged loan application my father had signed in my name. In another row sat Jessica, her face pale but determined, our eyes meeting with the silent understanding of two daughters who had seen their family's mask finally crack. My father sat behind the defendant's table, shoulders slumped, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He looked nothing like the man who once lectured me about honor, about duty, about loyalty. There was no arrogance now, no indignation, only defeat. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber, recounting the charges: identity theft, wire fraud, intentional misrepresentation. My name, read aloud in the context of a crime I hadn't committed, felt like a dagger twisting in slow motion. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Because this time, I wasn't the broken daughter. I was the woman who had survived. When asked if I wanted to address the court, I stood slowly, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I'm not here seeking vengeance. I'm here for protection, for myself and for my children. What my father did went beyond betrayal. He didn't just steal my identity. He stole the trust I was just beginning to rebuild. He weaponized the one thing I gave back to him, a second chance. And he did it under the belief that I'd stay silent." I turned to look at him directly. "You thought I wouldn't hold you accountable. You thought because I was your daughter I'd protect you. But my children, my 3 babies, they're watching me. And I won't teach them that love means erasing yourself. I won't show them that family can hurt you without consequence." When I sat down, Jessica reached over and took my hand. It was a small gesture, but it grounded me, reminded me of how far we had come. The judge issued a deferred sentence, mandatory restitution, community service, and 5 years probation. My father wouldn't serve jail time, but he would carry a permanent mark on his record. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was enough. The aftermath of the trial wasn't cinematic. There was no slow-motion hug in the parking lot, no last-minute apology that changed everything. My father barely looked at me as he exited the courthouse. My mother followed behind him silently. She had barely spoken during the entire hearing. I knew then, truly, that this chapter of my life had closed. Back at home, the triplets greeted me with squeals and sticky hands, wrapping themselves around my legs like they hadn't seen me in years. Olivia smiled from the kitchen, pouring juice into cups. The home I had built, brick by brick, boundary by boundary, stood solid around me. There was no echo of judgment here, No ghosts of obligation. Just warmth. Just truth. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the triplets sleep, one by one. Ethan curled up in his dinosaur blanket, Mila snuggled with her worn bunny, and Caleb snoring softly with his hand clutched around a toy truck. I had once feared I'd never be enough for them. Not after James died. Not after the surgery. Not after the emotional war with my parents. But now I realized I wasn't just enough. I was everything they needed. Not because I was perfect, but because I chose them. Because I chose myself. I took out the old letter my mother had written, the one she mailed after their downfall began. I read it one last time, tracing her handwriting with my fingertip. There were genuine emotions there. Regret, reflection. But it didn't change the past. It couldn't. And that's the truth no one wants to say aloud. Some apologies don't fix anything. Some betrayals are too deep. Some wounds scar, no matter how much time passes. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning how to live without dragging the pain forward. So here's what I've learned. Family isn't blood. Family is effort. Family is who shows up when it's hard, not who shows off when it's convenient. You don't owe people access to your life just because they share your DNA. You owe yourself peace, protection, and permission to walk away from anyone who makes you feel like love is a debt you must repay with silence. And when they call you a burden, remember this. Their inability to carry you says more about them than it ever did about your weight. This story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. It's about taking back your voice after years of being talked over. It's about setting boundaries so your children won't have to recover from your pain. It's about knowing when to fight and when to let go. I chose to let go. I chose peace. So if you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you most, if you've ever been called dramatic, or difficult, or a burden, please hear me when I say, you are not broken. You are not too much. You are allowed to walk away. And when you do, you don't lose family. You find freedom. Let this be your reminder that healing isn't always quiet. Sometimes it comes with courtrooms, therapy, and hard decisions. But every step is worth it if it brings you closer to the life you deserve. And if this story moved you, if you felt a flicker of courage stir inside you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not for me, but for every voice like mine that's still afraid to speak. Because the more we tell these stories, the more we remind each other that we're not alone. And that love, real love, doesn't require you to suffer for it. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until next time, take care of your heart and protect your peace at all costs.